randomness extractor, although I guess you have already seen this in previous talks. So again, it's a function that takes as input some defective random source and then outputs a distribution that is almost uniform. And then this standard 2 now is used to bridge the gap of uniform random bits requiring standard applications and defective random bits in practice. And as you have already seen in the previous talks, it's impossible to construct a deterministic extractor for one generic random source. And of course, generic random source is like this, right? So we're saying the mean entropy is measured by this, right? So if the mean entropy is k, it means that the probability of getting any support in the random variable is at most 2 to the minus k. And you can just think of it as a uniform distribution over some unknown subset of size at least 2 to the k. So we know it's impossible to build a deterministic extractor for just one weak random source. And therefore, we have to somehow restrict the class of sources in order to build deterministic extractors. And there are several classes of sources that have been studied in this literature. Some of them you have seen in the previous talks. So for example, independent sources. There's a lot of long history. Samplable sources, which are sources that are sampled by small size circuits. And bit fixing sources, where you have a uniform string and some of the bits are fixed. And small space sources, again, are sources that are generated by small space computation like branching programs. And affine sources, so the first one, independent sources, and the affine sources are going to be the topic of this talk. Okay. So again, the independent sources are just some independent weak random sources, and we want to build an extractor for this class of sources. And then also in the affine case, you have some affine source which is like the uniform distribution over some unknown affine subset. And then you want to construct an extractor that takes as input and output almost uniform distribution. Right. So formally, we define an affine source to be some uniform distribution over an unknown k-dimensional affine subspace. Again, here we have a vector space in the field FQ here. And then when we say affine extractor, it means we have this deterministic function that takes any element in this vector space and then outputs an m-bit output string, and such that whenever X is a k-dimensional affine subspace, the output is close to uniform. And there is this weaker version of an extractor called disperser, which does not require the output to be uniform, but only requires it has a large support size. And in most cases, we would like to have a full support size, let's say 2 to the m. Okay. And in this talk, we're going to focus on this case where the field is F2, and in some sense, it's going to be the hardest case, because previous work have shown that when the field is large, we could use something like Weyl theorem, like this estimation of character sums, which can actually allow us to build affine extractors for very small dimensions. But the case where the field size is small is going to be generally hard. So again, so there are some motivations for affine sources. I guess you all have seen some motivations for independent sources. But for affine sources, so first of all, it's a natural generalization of this thing called oblivious bit fixing sources. I mean, because bit fixing sources is just where you have some uniform bits and the others are fixed. It's a special case of affine sources. It's also a special case of polynomial sources and algebraic sources. Polynomial sources are the sources which are generated by a system of polynomial equations. And so here, affine sources are just generated by linear equations. Right? And algebraic sources are the common zeros of a system of polynomial equations. And affine sources can be viewed just as common zeros of the system of linear equations. And as some of you may have already seen in the previous talk this morning, actually affine dispersers for this small dimension have the best known circular lower bounds of 3.101 n. This is one of the papers in this box. Okay. Right. So again, so when we talk about constructing these extractors, the first thing that we want to know is how good the parameters can be. And it's actually very easy to show by using probabilistic method that very good independent source extractors and affine extractors exist. For example, in the independent source case, we can show that extractors exist for just two independent sources with very small entropy, like log n plus some constant. And in the affine case, we can show that extractors exist for this entropy, like order of log n. And you can also show that if you pick a random function, then with high probability, this function is actually this kind of two-source extractors or affine source extractors with this kind of parameters. But of course, the difficult part is to how to construct explicitly such extractors. Okay, so here are some of the previous constructions. So for the independent source extract case, there has been a lot of work here, right? Starting from the pioneering work of Shaw and Goldrick, and subsequently there has been a lot of work, and eventually Chatterjee and Zuckerman has constructed the first two-source extractor for polylogarithm entropy, except that their extractor only outputs one bit here. Okay. And in the affine extractor case, previously the best-known construction by Bourgain and Yevdokov and also myself can deal with entropy as something like n over square root of log n. So just slightly below linear entropy. And a paper by Rao can actually construct extractors for something called low-weight affine sources with polylogarithm entropy. It's low-weight affine sources are just, for example, bit-fixing sources. And in the disperser case, previously the best-known result is a paper by Chateau in 2011, where he constructed dispersers for the entropy 2 to the log n to the 0.9, which is slightly below polynomial entropy that can output log n bits. Okay. And in this paper, basically, our main results are the following. So the first result is an improvement of the Chatterjee and Zuckerman two-source extractor, where we can get essentially the same entropy, but we can now output k to the delta bits if we require the extractor to be a strong two-source extractor. If we do not need the extractor to be strong, we can actually output k bits or even close to 2k bits. And in the affine source case, we can now have an explicit extractor for this polylogarithm entropy that outputs k to the delta bits. Right. So in the rest of the talk, I just described on a high level some of the ingredients that go into the constructions. So on the very high level, the construction is going to follow what is done in this work by Chatterjee and Zuckerman. So we first take this weak random source, so, whether it's a two independent sources or a affine source, and then we're going to turn them deterministically into something called a non-obligate bit-fixing source. So basically, it's a source where you have some random bits, and some of the other bits are not random and can also depend on the random bits. But you also have the property that the random bits are something like k to the alpha wise independent, where k is the entropy of the source and alpha is some constant. And then we're going to build an extractor for this non-obligate bit-fixing source. So that's the high-level construction. And to have such a construction to reduce this weak random source into non-obligate bit-fixing source, a very useful tool here is something called a seeded extractor. And I guess most of you have already, again, seen it in previous talks. So it's a function that takes a defective random source, as well as another uniform random bits, which are supposed to be small, something like order of log n bits. And then using this additional random bits seed, we're going to output a distribution that is close to uniform. Okay. And again, so like you have seen, we have almost optimal constructions of such seeded extractors. And in general, we also require this seeded extractor to be strong, in the sense that the output is close to be uniform even given the seed. And for the applications of affine extractors, we also need this extractor to have another property. So we require this extractor to be something called a linear seeded extractor. So what this means is that if you fix any particular seed, then the output of this extractor is actually a linear function of the source. And there are very well-known constructions of CD extractors. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about how to reduce a affine source to a non-obvious bit fixing source. Of course, the reduction for two independent sources have already appeared in, for example, the work of Chanabati in the document. Okay, so we're going to take a seeded extractor we have seen before, and then we're going to take every possible seed, and for each possible seed, we're going to have this function, and we apply this function to the original source. And each of the function is going to have an output, and then we're just going to arrange them on the right-hand side like this matrix. Right? So again, so each fixed seed is going to define a deterministic function. So here, this whole process is going to be deterministic. And we get this matrix with where the number of rows is 2 to the d, where d is seedlets. So for example, if it's order of log n, then we have polynomial number of rows here. Okay. And now if you take a closer look at this matrix, then you realize that actually it already looks like a bit fixing sources. Because, again, I forgot to say that by the property of the strong extractors, we actually can show that some of the rows here, like the black rows, they are already uniform, and the other rows, they are not uniform, and may depend on the black rows. So if you take this matrix, then you can see that it's already like a bit fixing sources. We already have some uniform random bits there, except we don't know where are these random bits. Okay. And another problem here is, like I said, the uniform bits, again, they could have arbitrary dependence among themselves, so it's not necessarily k to the alpha was independent, which, again, so that's what we need for the applications. So the step, the extra step would be we have to somehow enforcing k to the alpha was independence in these uniform rows. And to do that, actually, there are several ways here by now. So, for example, let's say with this matrix, let's say, suppose we have another independent weak random source, eventually k here. Then we can actually take this matrix and this independent weak random source and do this, all of these alternating extractions where you have seen in previous talks, and this correlation breaker where you have seen Gill's talk, right? So all of these tools can be used if we have this matrix together with an independent weak random source. And we can just run these existing protocols and turn them into a non-obvious bit fixing source where the uniform random bits are actually k to the alpha was independent. So this is done in previous works. But the question here, of course, is that we don't have this extra independent weak random source, right? So how are we going to do it? So it turns out that the affine source has a very nice property, so which is captured by this k, by the key lemma, which says if x is a affine source and L is some linear function, and then if you apply this linear function to this affine source, then you can actually decompose this affine source into the sum of two independent sources, A and B here, where this B actually is going to have, for any supporting this random variable B, the linear function applied to it is going to be 0. And in another sense, if you apply this linear function to this x, it's just a bijection between this source A here. And so this is another picture that shows that you can decompose this source into A and B here. And so if you think about it, and you use a linear function, then somehow magically, I would just say that somehow magically it turns out that if you just use a linear city extractor to do all of these alternating extraction, then it's going to be enough if you just use this matrix that we have obtained before with this initial source x itself. So, okay. But again, so there are a lot of details here, but this is a high-level idea, and I just want to make sure that this is a key point that goes into the reduction from affine sources to non-obvious bit fixing sources. Okay, so that's the first part. And the next part, I'm going to talk about how we can get more output bits from this non-obvious bit fixing source. So again, we'll start with this extractor construction in the work by Chanabati Zuckerman. They already have this extractor for this non-obvious bit fixing source. source. Except, again, so they only output 1 bit. But the nice property is that their extractor is actually a resilient function in the sense that if you take any small subset of the bits, then that subset is going to have small influence. Meaning that if you take a uniform random distribution over the rest of the bits, then with high probability, the output is fixed if the rest of the bits are fixed. So now what we can do is we're going to partition these non-obsolete bit fixing sources into several blocks. And for each block, we're going to apply this CZ extractor where we get 1 output bit. Right? Of course, we're going to partition the blocks so that none of the blocks is going to consist of all bad bits. So we can make sure they're bad. And because we know that this is a resilient function and any small subset has small influence, so just by a simple union bound, so we can actually change this thing into something else where actually these bad bits do not depend on the uniform random bits. And we can show that these two distributions, the outputs of these two, the distributions of these two outputs are actually within a small statistical distance, despite the property of small influence. And so now we can just look at this thing, where it's like a non-obsolete bit fixing source. Okay, so now we have these several bits of outputs, y1, y2, y3. Now if you consider, let's take the parity of some of the bits here, then again, so one important observation is that initially this CZ extractor is actually a depth-4 AC0 function. And if you take the parity of them, and parity can itself be written as a depth-2 AC0 function. And if you combine them, it's still AC0 function. Right? So the parity of these bits is still an AC0 function and can also be fooled by T-wise independence for a large enough T here, if we would choose the parameters correctly. And this would imply that actually the parity of these bits is going to be close to uniform. Because these, initially they are uniform, and now they are kind of independent if you take the XOR, so it's actually going to decrease the bias. Okay. And this does not just work for a particular subset of the XOR of the bits, it actually works for the XOR of any non-empty subset. Okay. So now in order to get more output bits, we can just take the generative matrix G of some asymptotically good linear code, and then we let the final output to be G times this Y, where Y is the previously output bits. And then the property of this generative matrix ensures that if you take the XOR of any non-empty subsets of this Z, then it's going to have a large weight, and essentially it's going to be the parity of a large number of these YIs, which is again going to be close to uniform by the previous argument. And now what we can do is just use the XOR lemma, right? The XOR lemma tells us that if you have a bunch of random bits where the XOR of any non-empty subset is close to uniform, then actually you can show that these bits are actually close to uniform themselves. So you just choose the parameters correctly, and you get that the output Z here is actually close to uniform itself. Right, so that's basically the high-level ideas, and I just want to conclude with some open problems. The first open question, like you have seen in previous talks, is to try to get the entropy down to essentially optimize, like order of log n. And in the case of two-source extractors, there has been some following up work. And now we can actually have a two-source extractor with this kind of entry order of log n times log log n. But it would be nice to get rid of this log log factor and to get down to order of log n eventually. And another question, of course, is to get beta error. Right now, the error is only like 1 over poly, and it looks like we might need new techniques to get beta error here. And again, it would be nice to generate these techniques to other class of sources. And for example, in one of my works with channel butting, so we have extended these kind of techniques to the class of sum set sources, which are the sum of some independent sources. It would be nice to generate these techniques to other classes of sources as well. And that's all. Thank you.
Questions?
I didn't check it, but for this work, it's going to be still some large